Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Erasing the Stigma. Today, I'm here with Jean Bentoncourt. Would you be able to give my listeners a little bit of a snapshot of your life story?
Sure. I'm a retired children's book author. I grew up in Vermont, around Burlington, Rutland area, and was a teacher for 17 years in Vermont, but mostly in the New York City public school system. And my master's degree is in film studies. After teaching for 17 years, I began a writing career. I wrote children's books, scripts for after school specials, scripts for HBO, a couple of adult scripts. I think in the end there were 77 books. But the work I'm proudest of and most known for were the Pony Pal books. And one of the three Pony Pals in that series of 44 books is dyslexic. And we always mention her dyslexia and her learning problems in the books. She's an artist and solves the problems the Pony Pals try to solve, and most often do, of course. She draws her solution and her friends write theirs, but her way of communicating her ideas is through drawing. After 30 years of being, first 17 years of teaching, 30 years of being an author, I retired from writing and began to do art full time because that was my major love and a way I wanted to have more time to do that. And had been taking art lessons for about 30 years before I retired from writing. Um, and that's the path of my life. Vermont, New York City, that's me. Um, I live near the American Museum of Natural History in New York.
That is outstanding. You have an amazing life story. Thank you so much for sharing. And so, like you said, you were an author, and one of the characters in your book had dyslexia. And I think that's so amazing, including her in all of your stories and showing her talents through art. So, would you be able to tell our listeners a little bit about your inspiration for that character and why you thought it was important to emphasize that she was an artist?
The inspiration was my own daughter and my own experiences, because one of the things that happens to Anna notice it's a palindrome, her name. One of the things that happens to Anna is that she almost has to give up having a pony because she's not doing as well in school as her parents think she should be able to do, because no one's diagnosed her dyslexia. And my daughter Nicole had the same problem and wasn't diagnosed until she was a junior in high school. And it was when Nicole was diagnosed that I realized that, I'd always seen that her learning style was the same as mine, but I had never heard of dyslexia, even though I was an educator in an English department. When I was doing those things, no one was talking about it. And when I discovered there was such a thing, I could see that it was like Nicole's characteristics and my own. So I had her tested, and from the results of her test in analyzing how I learned and how she learned, I could see that I too am dyslexic. And by then I was writing. By the time she was 16, I was writing books, I was writing scripts, and I thought a lot about my learning style and about hers, and realized I really wanted to include dyslexia in my work, but not in a nonfiction way. I'm a fiction writer. It suits me best. So I started thinking about that. And one day I was working on a teen novel, and there was a kid, Brian, in the book. And this kid just kept stumbling over everything. He was doing crazy stuff. He wasn't doing very well in school. And I thought, oh, Brian, you're not much of a brain, are you? And I had typed, because I'm dyslexic, his name Brain. And then I thought, I've got to do a book called My Name is Brain Brian, a dyslexic kid who can't even spell his name right. And the book opens close to the first day of school when he writes Brain on the when the kids have to write their names on the board, he writes Brain instead of Brian. And that's what kicks off the book. It's been in print since 1993, and it's about a dyslexic boy who is undiagnosed with dyslexia until a teacher helps he and his family helps him and his family to figure it out. And then, he goes on to be more successful. He uses learning techniques that suit him better. He makes a video for a project. He writes a poem for a project. Um, it's a charming book. Anybody who's dealing with dyslexia may already know about it. And it's for like sixth grade reading level, fourth or sixth grade reading level. And from there, then soon after that, I began the Pony Pals, and it just was natural for me to think one girl is dyslexic, because then it's just her dyslexia isn't the point of every story, but it shows up in every story because of her learning style. And so it's more natural, right?
Yeah.
And I'm very pleased with the results of those books and the influence they've had on the dyslexic community and on education in general. Any kid reading that book will have to figure out what dyslexia is and perhaps recognize it in themselves or a friend. Does that answer the question?
It does. It 100% answers the question. And I think that that is wonderful that you do include dyslexic characters in your books. And like you said, if there's a child who's reading that book or a parent who's reading the book to their child, and they might recognize some of these learning techniques and characteristics in themselves or in the child, I think that's wonderful to see them as a positive portrayal in the book. And it might help them with this journey of identifying that they may have dyslexia or another language-based learning disability. So I would recommend to anyone to read the Pony Pal book series and the book My Name is Brian, because they both seem like amazing reads, but they're also wonderful for spreading awareness about dyslexia and other language-based learning disabilities. So like you said prior, you are an author and you had found out that you had dyslexia later in life. And with your daughter as well, she found out in high school. So there's often connotations behind dyslexia that dyslexia is a hindrance to success. And these are false connotations, and you are a wonderful portrayal of these false connotations because of your outstanding success. However, say you did find out that you had dyslexia when you were a young child. Do you think that these connotations of dyslexia would have discouraged you from pursuing a career as an author?
I don't think so. I think that if I had known early, certainly earlier than I did, uh, I feel it would have been helpful because I would not have felt lesser. When I couldn't do well in foreign language, when I couldn't remember people's names, um, when I couldn't memorize vocabulary. I think that it would have helped me tremendously. I don't know if I would have chosen a different career path. One thing just followed another. When I chose a career as a teacher, that was like, we're talking the 50s. There were very few options for women, certainly in the culture I grew up in a very conservative home in Vermont. So, first of all, I think if I had been born at a different time, it would have made a huge difference. But since that's when I was born and that was the path I was on, and by the time I found out I had this learning difference, I was already an adult. And my dyslexia is not as serious as my daughter's and my grandchild's, she's a they, them, is definitely more serious than either of ours. My daughter would have benefited tremendously from having been diagnosed earlier and getting the help she needed, even in a special school. We've been able to send the grandchild to special schools for dyslexia, and it's certainly made her path easier. And her choice of career will be driven by her talents, not by her challenges. Um, but I was an English teacher for a long time, so I think the repetition, correcting other people's writing. I think dyslexics can make people with dyslexia can be marvelous writers, particularly with computers. And because just people who have most of the people I've met who have dyslexia, adults and children, and I've done many interviews and I've known many and worked in schools, for doing interviews with kids, their their grasp of psychological nuance is they have to be so alert to get by in the world to what's going on with other people that they develop a kind of empathy that's not necessarily general in the population. And I think that empathy, and I have a strong visual sense, so I can picture things in my mind, all of those basic traits that are who I am, a lot of them are because I'm dyslexic. So if I could have understood all that at an early age, certainly I would have had art training. I would have, if I had teachers who understood. There's been a difference too in this whole thing about learning reading. Like when I was a kid and I was learning reading, we drew letters in the air. It was phonics rather. And it took me a long time to learn to read. And I'm still a reader who hears in my head, but and I mostly do audiobooks, by the way. But to be able to understand that that's the problem you have, that you know, just makes a huge difference. And it can when my daughter found out she was dyslexic, she was at first, and we were all super relieved because we know we know. But when she went to school, it was whole word learning, and that's the worst approach to reading for dyslexics. So she did not get off to a good start. I did. I got off to a really good start because of the teachers I had in first and second and third grade.
Yes. Yes. And like you were saying, teachers and educators can make such a profound impact on whether a child feels confident and successful with their dyslexia or the complete opposite and not confident. And so you had said that your grandchild has went to a specialized school for students with dyslexia and reading struggles, which you said helped them a lot. And so one thing that I am a huge advocate for is in all classrooms to integrate art integration for all students of all different who benefit from all different learning techniques, because it helps people better visualize what they are learning and what they are what's being taught in the classroom. And so with your experience with your grandchild and your daughter, would you say that you would find it beneficial for classrooms and educators to integrate art integration into the classroom?
Totally 100%. My first goal had been to be an art teacher myself. It just didn't work out because I was not in a position to make that choice. Um, but yes, and my daughter too is an artist. She's a filmmaker and she paints and draws. And all three of us, that's our happy, safe place. That's where we, it's just incredibly important to all three of us, more so than other members of the family who do not have dyslexia.
I think that is wonderful. And so you are an outstanding artist, and you have mentioned that both your grandchild and your daughter are both creative as well. Would you give any attribution to dyslexia to your creative talents, whether that is your writing, your screenwriting, or your art?
Totally. I totally. And it's I wouldn't want to say the price I pay is being dyslexic and getting lost occasionally when I'm trying to go someplace or not remembering somebody's name, and my struggles learning Spanish. But I I just know I can just feel in my brain neuroplasticity here, right? That those gifts that I've been given, and they definitely are gifts,
Mhm.
um, are because that other side of my brain doesn't work as well. It's just that's the kind of person I am, and that's where my gifts belong. It doesn't mean I'm not working on that other side of my brain and doing puzzles and keeping myself as sharp as I can, but it's not where I'm going to excel.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
not where I'm going to excel, and I know that. and I know where I can excel. So I want to give every kid the opportunity to be learning in ways that they can excel and in fields in which they can excel. And if you look at the who is an architect, who is an artist, who is a writer too, you're going to find more people with dyslexia than in the general population. Actors, it's quite extraordinary when you start to break it down and analyze it.
Yes, I 100% agree. I think it is so amazing when you look at the list of, if you just look up famous people with dyslexia, there are so many people in incredible fields, like you said, actors, entrepreneurs. You can do wonderful things with dyslexia. And I really do appreciate your outlook that dyslexia is one of the proponents of the reason why you've had success in creative fields. And so, there is definitely an outlook maybe with someone who's struggling with dyslexia at a younger age at school that they feel like because they're not excelling in subjects such as language arts and social studies, because those are labor intensive for reading and writing, they feel less than, like you said before, rather than taking that outlook of, yes, I struggle with these certain subjects, but I can excel at other creative things. So, what would you say to a young child to boost their confidence and to bring them to the outlook that you have developed, that despite the challenges, there's so many amazing doors that open up to creative success because of your dyslexia?
I would totally talk to the parents first because there has to be that positive, supportive attitude in the home.
Mhm.
And oftentimes somebody else is dyslexic in the family, and that would be the person to talk to be sure they're living their true potential too. But for the child, it's like do what you love to do and work hard in the things that you find hard that you need to support your being able to do what you love to do. Right? I mean, that's that's the path. It's just you need everybody needs to feel successful and enjoy some aspect of their daily life. And that might mean a parent needs to sign a kid up for art classes on the side and forget about sending them to math workshop for one semester or balance the two. A lot of dyslexic kids love sports where they're not being competitive because they feel put down in so many other areas that they're afraid of the competition, or they just like that kind of something I long for, that quiet moment of just being in yourself with your creativity. So they like sports like running and swimming, which is mine is swimming, dancing. I was a dancer until COVID hit and my classes stopped. Um, and those, and then finding ways. Henry Winkler is a very famous dyslexic and does a
Mhm.
lot for the dyslexic community in terms of being a spokesperson, said that even though he has trouble memorizing, when it's doing lines, he has no trouble because he's into the emotion in the character.
Oh,
And he
wow.
can, I mean, I heard him recently on the radio, I think last week, being interviewed about his dyslexia. And I found that amazing. I mean, I must say, when I was a star in some plays in high school, I did have a lot of trouble memorizing the lines. But he didn't. He has other areas where it's difficult, but he's found his good and his happy place. But he had a horrible time as a kid because he was always the one who was bullied. He was always the one who was called dumb. And that just can't happen to our kids today. We can't let that happen. And it's up to the teachers and it's up to the school systems. New York City, our mayor, our current mayor, is dyslexic, and he's going to try to do more with the public education system to handle it. But it means they're going to have to start teaching phonics,
Yes.
and it means they're going to have to break kids into groups without labeling. And it means they're going to have to stop judging how smart a kid is by how well they read, because it's not an accurate judgment.
Mhm.
Anyway,
No.
don't get me going there. I
No,
can
I
go on and on.
completely agree with everything you're saying, especially because I do agree that the school system and the way that we set up our academics and that normal connotation of what is smart is not accurate, and it can be so detrimental to someone's confidence. And I think that is outstanding advice to help your child find other things that they feel confident and they can succeed in. Because let's say you felt confident and happy in dancing. If a child felt that same way, whether it's dancing or art or running or swimming, like you said, they could find solace in that activity and build their confidence in that activity. And that confidence can translate into their academic space. So I just think that is wonderful advice. And you are 1,000% right that we cannot judge our students on the grades that they get. And our students are so smart and amazing people outside of this rigorous school environment that we have set up. So I think for all parents, finding another space where a child feels confident and happy is such an integral thing to help them with their language-based learning disability and their reading struggles. So I really, really appreciate all of the advice that you have given me and my listeners, and for you sharing your life story. You have an amazing story. And my last question for you is, what is one thing you think that my listeners can do to erase the stigma behind language-based learning disabilities?
I think those who are not to be ashamed of it and to speak up about dyslexia and to inspire people like you to do this good work, Julia. I mean, it is a thing. 10% of the population suffers from dyslexia, probably more because diagnosis isn't always spot on. Um, and I think just having it be part of the parlance of education and certainly relating it to art,
Mhm.
relating it to art education and multisensory learning, which art education is.
Yes. Yes.
That's it.
Thank you so much. I think that is phenomenal advice, and I will keep that advice with me as I continue working and bringing forth color and confidence. And I hope all of my listeners are able to take the amazing advice that you have given to help better their lives and their students and their families' lives. So thank you so much for speaking with me.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Bye.